All right, guys, let's get into it. Let's get into it. The conversation that everybody wants to have right now, the conversation that everybody's talking about. First of all, time out. Before we even get into the conversation, let's congratulate Anastasia and Paige McPherson from Team USA doing an amazing job. Anastasia, I hope I'm saying that right. I call her Anna. She got first. She got gold. Paige, oh, so close. She almost got to the middle round. She did fight for third. She just didn't make it. But great fights all around. So, a lot of people are like, man, I would have done better. If you would have done better, go to the Olympics, right? That's the number one thing. Don't say that you're gonna do better if you're not at the Olympics, all right? So first of all, Paige, congratulations, Anna. If you guys are ever listening, I would love to sit down and do an interview with you too. I think you guys are both amazing fighters, all right? Now let's get into it. The controversy, the subject, the thing that everybody's talking about right now: old school versus new school. What is better? Well, let me give you my professional opinion. This is my opinion. Take it how you want it. I like the old school fighting. I really do. I like the old school fighting. It was exciting. There was a lot of hard hits. New school. I like the new school fighting. I know some of you guys are like, "What? New school is boring." Look, it's not as interesting. It's not as Well, I don't know. I can't say that it's not as interesting. It's a different game, right? Time changes. Everything moves on. You guys are forgetting. Football moved on. Baseball moved on. Soccer moves on. Every sport out there 10 years ago is not exactly the same it was today. Right? Look at the sport 10 years ago. Look at any sport. You can talk about any sport. Basketball, football, soccer, volleyball. Every sport changed. Every sport's involved. Either for the better or for the worse, right? I mean, it's either going to get better one way or get worse. But it doesn't matter. Because game involves in all aspects, right? So, me personally, old school, loved it. New school, loved it. It's in its own different, in its own what do you call it? In its own, it's its own, right? Old school. Let's talk about old school real fast. A lot of people say, and this is something that I want to make clear right here. A lot of people immediately say old school has a lot more power. I'm not gonna say yes, and I'm not gonna say yes, but I'm not gonna say no. I'm gonna talk about both of them, right? So you have to remember, for those of you that are doing the new school stuff, the data and the KPMP, they are met to a certain threshold. So you do have to hit with a significant amount of power. Now, is it as hard as it was back then? No, because I don't know. Because here's what you guys are forgetting, right? So back then there was no threshold. And because there was no threshold, you were hitting as hard as you can hit just to make sure that you got the point, right? If you didn't hit hard enough, so like, what was the measure for how the power, right? So the power, if you don't know back then, it was called a body displacement or trembling shock. Trembling shock means you had to hit your opponent so hard that the body moved. Trembling shock, that's the point, right? That was the measure. But how hard was that, right? And was that technically a hard kick? Because let's be honest, I could actually throw a kick and push somebody behind my kick, not necessarily hit hard, but put a little bit of push behind it and move them, and that would be called trembling shock, right? Or if you remember back then, a lot of the referees went by sound, right? So if a red player throws a round kick and a blue player throws a perfect patashagi and counter and hits right under and make that loud pop sound, it was a point, right? So some of it wasn't even necessarily how hard it was, just to look and the timing, and yes, the trembling shock as well. Now, the new school, they do have a power, they have these electronic check pads that measure power. So, being smart, they know just how hard to hit, right? They don't hit weak, but they don't hit super hard because they don't have to. They don't have to, right? I mean, you can go 6 minutes without using all of your energy. It's a chess game. Whether you like it or not, it is chess game. First of all, to anybody that made the Olympics in 2020 and to anybody that made the Olympics in 1988, you made the Olympics in your time, in your generation. You were the best of the best in your generation. Much respect to you. Anybody that made the Olympics in 2020, You are the best in your generation, in your weight class right now. So much respect to you. And again, we can go back and forth and say, oh yeah, but back in the 80s they hit harder. Yes, maybe so. But could these guys in the 2020s hit just as hard as the guy in the 80s? I think so. I mean, if they really hit hard. I mean, a lot of you guys keep thinking, well, the front leg doesn't have much power to back leg. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, yes, the back leg you can generate more power, but with that front leg you can throw a devastating down kick. I mean, an axe kick. So if y'all saw Lauren Williams, I don't have the clip up. Maybe I can upload the clip. But if you saw Lauren Williams, there was one fight that she fought when she was throwing an axe kick, and I actually never seen this before in a long time actually. When she brought her leg up to throw the axe kick, she was actually holding her hamstring, able to slide in, let go, and drop down on that kick. She didn't hit him in the head, hit her in the head, but had she hit somebody in the head, that would have been a devastating kick. That could have been a straight up knockout kick. Let's not forget, there were two knockouts yesterday, just alone. So today is the 26th, I believe. So on the 25th, Lauren Williams had a knockout with the spinning reverse hook kick, and somebody else had a knockout. So, yes, the new school may not be as devastating as the old school, but it is still impressive. It is still a fight, and they are still hitting hard. The only thing that I would say is the big difference, and I don't want anybody to get offended here, but I would say the only thing that's the biggest difference between the old school and the new school is the aggressiveness and the will to win versus back then in the 80s versus now. But I think that's a generational thing. I think that's back in the 80s, back in the 80s, back in the 90s, the jobs were different, right? There was a lot more hands on hand working jobs, right? You had to do physical work. Nowadays, a lot of things are a little bit easier. So there's a lot of machines to take care of the things that you had to put a lot of labor work back then, but now there's not as much labor, right? So back in the 80s, there's a lot of trade work. Now there's not. So with that being said, it's a generational thing. I believe that will, that desire, the drive, the aggressiveness, the tenacity to keep going until that bell rings is not the same as it was in the 80s. And I think that's the difference. Right? Because, I mean, even in basketball and football, sometimes you see a team get down by 20, 30 points, and they just give up. They give up. And that means nuts. Like in football, I've seen games before, like the coaches throw these lame plays and they're down by 2, 3 touchdowns. But but if you ever watched when Bill Belichick had Tom Brady, do you remember when they were down by 2 touchdowns? They would win by 2 touchdowns. If they were up by 2 touchdowns, they still scored 2 to 3 more touchdowns. There was no desire to stop. Right, you keep going until you finish. I think that's the biggest difference. So I think really it's not so much that old school is so much better than new school. Again, both is each its own sports, right? Back then it was all back leg, all spinning things, and also you have to remember, back then everything was 1 point, right? So whether you hit to the body or the head, it was 1 point. They didn't care, right? So they're just hitting. Nowadays, the point system changed. One point for punch, 2 points for kicking to the body, 4 points for spin kick to the body, 3 points for the head, 5 points for spinning to the head. So it all changes. So you have all of these strategies that you have to come up with. When in the 80s, there was just 1 point. 1 point kick to the body, 1 point punch to the body, 1 point punch to the kick to the head. That was it. So you just fought, right? You didn't have to worry about all the points. So you cannot blame the athletes, and that's the biggest thing I want to illustrate here. You cannot blame the athletes for playing the game the way the game is played. They're playing the game for the way the game is played, and they are being successful, and they are being athletes, right? They are fighting, they're winning, they're fighting, they're winning, and they're doing what they're supposed to do, and they come out on top. The people that come out on top is just. That's the thing. You got to adjust. You think 10 years from now the game's going to be the same as it was today? You think 20 years from now it's going to be the same as it was 10 years from now? It's going to change. Every sport changes. Football, basketball, baseball, soccer, everything. It's changed. It's all changed. Tennis, volleyball. It's all changed. So let's give respect where respect is due. Yes, I do like the old school just a little tad bit better, but I also like the new school, and I give respect where respect is due. Because you know what, some of those guys might hit me in the head faster than I can see it. Because those, I would say what, I'll tell you this, I think the new school people are a little bit faster off that front leg. And if you get popped in the face, I don't care how good you are, if you get hit in the face, you're going to get hit in the face in the hoops. Especially in the heavyweight division, some of those heavyweight guys, their legs are like 200 pounds. You get hit with a 200-pound leg. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. So don't, don't go knocking on these guys, right? Because they're putting in the work. They're putting in just as much work as those guys in the 80s did. Right? Those guys in the 80s had to wake up every morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, grind, 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 and grind until you shine. But guess what? The people in 2020, they're grinding, 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 grinding until they shine. So there is no disrespect to anybody that's doing the sport today. It is a sport. Now that is a debate for another time. Is does Olympic sparring a sport or an art? I would love to talk about that. I would love to hear you guys' opinion of what you think about the Olympic sparring today. Is it a sport or is it an art? And me personally, I believe it's a sport. But again, that's another discussion. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation today. And all this week, we're going to be covering all the Olympic fights, some of the biggest fights, some of the biggest disappointments, the underdogs. Man, I think everybody's bracket was busted like a March Madness. If you had a perfect bracket, I would say you're lying. Right? Show me your perfect bracket if you had it. Other than that, you're lying about it, bro. All right, you guys have a good day. I'll see you guys later.